Now, for both the dynamic icon and the formatted date, I'll actually go back to my expense start in the models folder. Because in there, I want to tweak the expense class to make outputting a formatted date a bit easier, and I want to add a new value to this file. So not to the expense class, but to the file as a whole. Here, I want to add a constant value called category icons, or the constant is called category icons, and the value should be a map where the keys will be category enum values, and the values of those keys in this map will be the actual icons that should be displayed for the different categories. So that in this expense Dart file, we don't just store the definition of our expense value objects, but instead we also store the available categories and the icons that belong to these categories. You could split this across multiple files, but here I'll keep it all in one file. So here my keys are these different enum values like category food with the dot notation here. And then the value set with a colon here in a map, as you learned before in this course, would be an icon. And here I'll use Flutter's built-in icons class, which of course must be imported. So material.dart from Flutter must be imported. And then here for food, I'll use the lunch dining icon. And of course you can browse through all those icons and pick the icons you like most, but I'll use this one for the food category. Then for the travel category, I'll use icons flight underscore takeoff. For the leisure category, I'll use icons.movie. And for the last category, the work category, I'll use icons.work. So these are my icons, and I'll soon use them here in expense item Dart. But before we do that, I want to tweak this expense class. This class at the moment is simply defined to define the data structure of our expense objects. And this is of course very useful because that allows us to create such expense objects with ease, and it gives us auto-completion and type safety when working with them. But of course you can not just store properties in classes, instead you can also add methods to classes. And here we could add a method called getFormattedDate. Though if you find yourself defining methods that start with get as a name, or that are in the end all about transforming one of these property values, you could, instead of creating such a method, also create a so-called getter. For that you use the special get keyword built into Dart, and then the name of your getter, which now should be named like any other property, for example formatted date. And you should also define your return value, so the type of value that will be produced by this getter. And you skip these parentheses, instead you just have opening and closing curly braces. And between those curly braces, you return your value, which should depend on your other property values. And here I want to reach out to my date property and format that. Now, formatting dates manually in Dart is quite cumbersome, and for that reason we'll use another third-party package here, the Intl, INTL package, for which you can simply search to find it on pub.dev. And as always, you can learn more about this package here. It's a quite powerful package that can help with localization as well. But here we'll use it to output a formatted date, and for that we'll just add it to this project by running flutter pub add intl. And with it added, in this expense Dart file, we can import it just as we imported Flutter or the UUID package by importing intl, and then here the intl.dart file, that's what we need here. And now with that package imported, we can use the date format class, which is provided by this intl package, and there the ymd constructor function, and we'll store the value of calling this constructor function in a final variable that could be called formatter. And ymd simply creates a formatter object which we can then use to format dates. So it's a utility object, you could say, created with help of the date format class and this special constructor function provided by the Intel package. And this YMD constructor function defines how the date will be formatted. And indeed, date format supports many constructor functions that could be used to format dates in all kind of different versions. Y stands for year, M for month, and D for day. And YMD used like this is just one of those predefined formatting options. So now we can use this formatter object down here in this getter. And on that object, you can call the format method and then pass your date to it. And this will return a string containing the formatted version of that date, so the more human readable version. And now with this formatted date added and this icon map added here, we can use this information here in expense item. And for the icon here in this inner row, instead of always using the hard-coded alarm, we can now reach out to our category icons map, which we have in that other file, and use this square bracket notation here to access a specific item in that map. And since in that map we use enum values as keys, we also have to use such an enum value as a key to access an icon, which is no problem because in our expense object with which we're working here, we have this category property which stores enum values of that category enum. Now we also have to remove const here though, because this isn't a const value anymore. Instead, this is generated dynamically. Well, and for the date, we now access expense.formattedDate. You don't add parentheses here because it's a getter, not a method. If you did define formatted date as a method instead, which you could also do, you would call it as a method. But here we're using this getter version. With all that done, this now looks way better because now we got different icons for different expenses. And as you can also see, we got formatted dates here, which are way more human readable.